Please join me in welcoming Amanda Lang.
Thanks so much for that. I'm not usually enamored of the long intro, but I had to get mic'd up there. So I was like, yeah, stretch, stretch. There are very few hard and fast rules in life. Don't wear white to a wedding. Don't tell a pornographic joke to your grandmother. I learned that one watching Seinfeld with my grandmother once, and it was the Master of Your Domain episode. There is a rule about speaking that I just want to share with you. There are very few rules about speaking, actually. You can tell pornographic jokes to some crowds. You should never, ever follow an Olympian. It's just a bad idea. They tend to be incredibly inspiring. They're fit. They have this unbelievable message. They're often good-looking. Like, that's fair. And then they have this kind of ace in the hole, and it's the imagery that they can use. And you just saw an example of it. I once gave a speech, and I followed an Olympic skier, and he ended his presentation, which was a motivational kind of, a really thought-provoking corporate message. Won a speaker spotlight's clients, of course. And he ended with this image of himself, who's a jumper, upside down on skis. And then I get to come up, and I've got stock charts. Now, I don't actually have stock charts for you today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a subject that's preoccupying me as a journalist right now, as a business journalist. Now, as a journalist, I do realize I'm not among the class of the most respected individuals on the planet. In fact, I often remember as a journalist that sometimes your low self-esteem is just good common sense. I like to tell the story about the guy that goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, I hate to tell you this, but you've got 6 months to live. And the guy says, my God, doctor, what am I going to do? And he says, well, I don't know. If it were me, I would marry a business journalist. And the guy says, that's going to make me live longer? And the doctor says, well, no, but it is going to seem longer. Now, so not universally loved, journalists occupy a pretty important position of trust and a very privileged one of observation. I get to talk to and inquire from some of the brightest minds out there. Often that's economists, which is an interesting exercise. There's a saw about economists that you can ask 6 of them for an opinion and you will get 6 opinions, and you'll get 7 if one of them went to Harvard. George Shaw said of economists that you could lay them all end to end and they still wouldn't reach a conclusion. If it's a nighttime speech, I usually add, they're probably happy to get laid at all. It's really great when an economist is up next. They love that. There is one thing, though, that economists agree on about Canada, and that's that we're doing pretty well. We came through the recession pretty well. We were an island of stability in a sea of turmoil. We actually, for a period of time, were the fastest growing economy in the G20. We were number 1. It's practically un-Canadian of us. In fact, when I lived in New York, I used to tell a joke about Canadians that went like this. How do you get 40 Canadians out of the swimming pool? You say, please get out of the swimming pool. Americans loved it. The thing is, though, for Canadians, the time for smugness or complacency about where we are and how we're doing is really behind us. Not only because other countries have caught up. It's true that overall, on the things that matter the most to most of us, we're still in pretty good shape. There are 3 things that we really care about. We care about our jobs, we care about our houses, and we care about kind of the well-being of our community, so the overall economic growth. And on all 3 metrics, Canada is still doing okay. StatsCan said last week that the jobs in this country bounced back at the fastest rate in history in any recession we've ever seen. Now, the government likes to say we've reclaimed all the jobs lost in the recession. It's one of those kind of damn lies problems where statistics are concerned, because we've reclaimed the sheer number of jobs we lost at the depths of the recession, but once you factor in population growth and immigration, we actually aren't where we should be, and we know that's true. 7.6% unemployment is still pretty bad, but it's a heck of a lot better than a lot of other places, and it's manageable. On our houses, it's sort of the same story. It's not that we haven't seen a correction in home prices, but it hasn't been off the cliff. Economists talk about a soft landing. It looks as though we may be headed there. And for most of us, our homes are the most important store of wealth. And most importantly, they're the most emotionally important store of wealth. We care most about our houses. And then on the economy, well, we're actually doing pretty well there too. Just a couple of days ago showed that at the end of last year, we returned to 3+% growth, which for Canada is pretty decent growth. The question is, what could derail this nice, steady stability that's facing us? And there are three things that could really turn this around. The first one is external shocks. Nothing you would think of. Say a bunch of young men in an Arab country overthrowing their ruler and upsetting oil production in what you think is a relatively unimportant nation, but it turns out could send oil prices to $100. That's the kind of external shock that our government's watching, the U.S. government is watching. If oil prices stay at or above $100 for any period of time, we actually could see a global recession again. The U.S. could revert to recession, and that is obviously going to be bad for us. The second thing that we really need to worry about is a repeat of 2007. Now, this is a whole other speech. But in that whole other speech, I can lay out for you how the three things that set us up for the financial crisis of 2007 have not changed at all. Lots of sound and fury. Nothing really has changed. In the most important fundamental ways, there were three things: capital ratios, the separation between banks and investment banks, and derivatives. And although we've talked a lot about all of them, nothing's really happened. And for those of you who are really plugged into the economics world, you may be saying, didn't they come up with Basel III in Switzerland? Isn't that new rules for banks? I'll just tell you that the U.S. banks never got around to implementing Basel II. So Basel III is a nice idea. As I say, that's another speech. It's a real pick-me-up. The most important thing that hasn't changed, actually, that imperils the world is a cultural one. You know, I don't want to pick on Goldman Sachs, except, gosh, they're easy to pick on. Goldman Sachs does not adhere to the spandex rule. Somebody told me about this recently, and now I think about it every time I'm out for a run. The spandex rule says just because you can get into something does not mean you should get into it. Goldman does not know that. So those are two things: external shocks, a financial crisis, that would upset our economy. Those are two things that are clearly beyond our control. We don't have a lot to do with either of those. There is one thing, and this is the third thing, that could send us into a tailspin, and it's the only thing that's 100% in our control, and it's productivity. And I realize that the very word productivity has a narcoleptic effect on a lot of you. So, and I go through this with the desk at the National. It comes up, and they say, "Really, Amanda? Productivity again?" The thing about productivity is it's probably the single most important economic concept for you and me. Simply put, in economic speak, productivity is the best way to improve personal wealth. If it goes up, per capita income goes up. If it goes down, per capita income will go down. But what it means in a practical way for you and me is if we live in a country with increasing productivity, our children will be better off than we are. And I'm here to tell you that we stand, as the first generation in history, in danger of leaving our children worse off than we are. It's never happened before. Now, there's a wonderful chart that you can look up on the internet that shows quality of life. And for millennia, quality of life, I know you're thinking, why don't you have this chart? I don't have any charts. Quality of life flatlined. From cave days to medieval times, people just didn't leave their children much better off than they had been. And that's despite the fact that they came up with some pretty cool stuff in that time. Fire, the wheel, it's not nothing. And then at one point on the quality of life chart, it's a hockey stick. It goes parabolic, straight up. So what happened? Anybody guess? At that moment in history, it was in the 15th century. Gutenberg invented the printing press. And all of a sudden, information that previously had been lost, forgotten, literally buried, was saved, stored, and shared. And it turns out that when we do that as human beings, we build on information. And our ability to make our lives better in every way, richer, more meaningful, goes up like a hockey stick. Incredible. So then you fast forward to today and you think, well, wow, if that's what the printing press did, which after all was a pretty clumsy device and moved pretty slowly, think about what the internet does. Think about what your handheld device does. There is no question that you can have that you can answer right away. Just Google it on your BlackBerry. You don't have to ask anybody anything dumb. Where is Tunisia? Look it up. There's a map. It'll pop up. So you would think, given that the printing press was that turning point, that we would actually see exponential increases in our quality of life. Because now information isn't just stored and shared, it happens instantly, globally. You can tweet it. You don't have to wonder what Charlie Sheen's up to. You can follow him on Twitter. Unfortunately, it's not enough. And Canada stands out in the world for having declining productivity. We make headway every now and then, and we think that we're turning a corner, but the truth is that for the last 4 decades, this has been a sorry state of affairs, and it's not getting better. So you might ask, okay, well, what's wrong with us? One way to get at that is to ask, what is productivity? We know what the outcome of it is. An actual definition of it, a simple way to put it, is if you have 10 employees, and this year they make 10 widgets, and the same 10 employees next year make 15 widgets, their productivity has increased. I think a better way to think about it is the same 10 employees may make the same 10 widgets, but the widgets get better.